Hi, Mitch Tanenbaum here. Thanks for joining me today. This is the security news update for September 24th, 2023. In the Security and Privacy Department, yet another Israeli-based spyware manufacturer has come to light. This one is called Insinet, and they've developed a commercial product called Sherlock, and it can infect devices via ads. One, yet another reason to use ad blockers. According to the newspaper Haaretz, the spyware has been sold to a country that is not a democracy. You can try to figure out who that might be. The general definition of these spyware companies is if your check clears, then you're a good guy. The malware works on Windows, Android, and iOS. So this is not just a Windows problem. This is also an Apple problem. And they've teamed up with another Israeli-based spyware maker called Kandiru. Uh, Kandiru is on the U.S. sanction list, so they're not necessarily considered a good guy. But they're packaging the two companies' products, and they're selling for about $6 million a copy. So if you're obviously a state-sponsored hacker or state-sponsored terrorist, you can afford $6 million. In the reference department, there is a website called satellitemap.space. They track satellites, and in this particular case, they're talking about Starlink, which lost a little bit over 200 satellites between July 18th and September 18th. Now, given that they have about 5,000 satellites up there, and they do have a short shelf life because they're in low Earth orbit, and they keep having to get zipped up to a higher orbit, which uses rocket fuel. But still, 200 satellites, those things are not cheap. Next, in the post-quantum, let's get ready for post-quantum era. We have a combination of things. With the everybody's doing, us and our adversaries, is they're stealing data now. They're storing it, knowing that when quantum computers get powerful enough and commercially viable enough, they will be able to decrypt all this stuff. So, Chrome, the browser, now supports something called X25519 Kyber 768, which is a mouthful. But that's a combination of the very popular elliptic curve algorithm X25519 and Kyber 768, which is one of the new post-quantum algorithms that NIST is testing. And so the idea there is you have to break both of those in order to um, crack the thing. The downside of that is that while Chrome is supporting that now in 116, release 116, the websites have to support it, or the libraries that the websites use. So that's a future. On the other hand, Signal, the popular encrypted messaging application, is rolling out PQXDH, Post Quantum Extended Triple Diffie Hellman. Now, if that isn't a mouthful, I don't know what is. That replaces the old, not so good X3DH, which is the extended triple Diffie-Hellman algorithm. And the idea is to make their encrypted messages more quantum resistant. And in the case of Signal, that's actually available today. When the next release comes out, or when you have downloaded that, you will have that. So, people are working on that. You should be thinking about what you need to do. If you're a developer, what libraries you're using, what are their plans, what are they going to have post-quantum crypto. The NIST products are kind of in draft form yet, so it's probably going to be another 6 months to a year before those are finalized. But nonetheless, you should be considering, what do I need to do? What's going to be on my list? Next, in important patches or important issues and patches, the SEC continues to go after the crypto industry. The crypto industry is looking for a invisibility cloak. They haven't found it yet. Perhaps they need to go ask Harry Potter for his. But they don't want to be regulated by the regulators around the world, like all other financial instruments are, likely because if they actually disclose how ridiculous some of these things are, then nobody would buy them except maybe as a souvenir. So in this case, they just settled with, excuse me, Stoner Cats 2, which attempted to finance an animated web series by selling non-fungible tokens, NFTs. But they weren't a equity raise, they weren't a debt raise, according to them. The SEC disagreed. This is the second time in a month that they've gone after one of these companies, and they have indicated they're going to continue to go after these guys because this stuff are financial things, and people will lose money. If you're buying it as a souvenir, then that's fine. People buy souvenirs all the time. But on the other hand, if you think you're going to make money, then I think the SEC feels that the people who are trying to raise the money need to go off and explain to you the risk that you're getting into. Next, Apple is getting into the 0-day business. This is like the 16th maybe this year, so they're really cranking them up there. These are 3 different 0 days. They are being exploited by spyware makers. One of them replaces one of the updates replaces a release of iOS that was just released last week. And then Mac OS is going to release Sonoma in a few days, so later this week, I think. So if you're in the Apple ecosystem, there's a lot of movement, a lot of noise, a lot of chatter. So just make sure you install your upgrades, and when you're talking about major releases like Mac OS Sonoma or iOS 17, make sure you follow, because typically those big new releases tend to have sub releases fairly quickly as they get out there in the universe. Next, there's a organization that apparently Linux devs use, developers, called freedownmanager.org. It has been distributing Linux malware for about 3 years. The Russian security firm, anti-hacker firm, Kaspersky Labs, is the one who outed them. And Kaspersky is an interesting organization, right? Because they're in Russia, they have to stay on Putin's good side. On the other hand, they keep outing all these Russian criminals, which can't make Putin very happy. So anyway, he's got a challenge above my pay grade for sure. Magically, the malware downloads stopped in 2022, last year. But if you have some if you use that site, you need to be careful and look at the stuff you've downloaded in the last couple of years. Crypto lovers and under legislative and legal, crypto lovers continue to fund North Korea. In this case, $250 million in 3 months they extracted from the crypto lovers. You could fund a hermit kingdom pretty easily at that kind of rate. Next, the Department of Justice has, they started up a new division last year to go after the False Claims Act folks, people who are violating the False Claims Act. False Claims Act has got a very storied past, goes back to the Civil War, and it basically allows people to prosecute people being you and me, as well as the government, people who defraud the government. In this particular case, there was a prosecution from an ex-employee who said that basically booze was cooking the books for about a decade, and they fined booze $377 million. Now the kicker in all this is that booze got I'm sorry, booze didn't get anything. Booze got a bad deal there. The whistleblower got about 20% of that. She got $70 million. So she's set for life. She's going to go to I don't know where, but South Pacific Island and drink Mai Tais or something. But what we're seeing here is they're starting to crank up these False Claims Act prosecutions. So if you sell to the government, know that the DOJ is watching you. Next, the UK Parliament passed the online safety bill. The UK Parliament's an interesting beast. There's a number of companies who've said they would leave the UK if this bill got passed. They say they're not going to enforce it. There is some language in the bill that says that you have to detect uh, kiddie porn, stuff like that, and the only way to do that is to basically ban encryption. But they say that they aren't going to ban encryption. A lot of companies like Wikipedia, for example, and Signal and some other folks have said basically, if you force us to do that, we're just going to leave the UK. So that puts the UK in a bit of a challenge. You got to remember, from a size standpoint, the UK is only just slightly larger than the state of California, so it's not a huge market for these companies, and a company could face a fine of up to 10% of their global revenue and/or jail time. So a CEO is going to think pretty hard about whether or not they want to go off and do this. We're waiting at this point on the regulations from the UK regulator Ofcom, and once those regulations comes on, that's when things become very dicey. But if you do encryption and you sell in the UK, something to watch out for. Next, UK fined TikTok 345 million euros for their child settings. One of the things that always bothers me is they're talking about activity that occurred in 2020. This is almost 2024. I think the only way you're going to get these guys' attention, I mean, obviously, a 350 million euro fine is will get anybody's attention. But the fact that what they're saying is, well, the fine is not appropriate because we fixed this problem years ago. Well, we sort of fixed the problem, kind of a little bit. So we don't think that that fine is appropriate. But you got to do this a lot more quickly, and governments, of course, are not good at that. Um, uh, in the human beings are human beings department, whether you want to call this bad design or human error, some people argue is you should never do anything with a computer that a human can make an error on in a way that compromises things. But in this particular case, um, Azure has a um, feature, I guess you call it a feature, called shared access signature tokens, which, if you do wrongly, give people a lot of power. There was a Microsoft engineer who tried to upload, or successfully uploaded, some open source AI models to GitHub. Unfortunately, because of the nature of the way this token worked and what the token gave access to, it also leaked 38 terabytes of private data, which included personal information of Microsoft employees, passwords, secret keys, Teams messages, and a bunch of other stuff. And it's been exposed since 2020. So just in case you think the screwing up is limited to customers, Microsoft does that too. That last year they had a similar problem, which dated back to 2017, so that would have been about 5 years. And it was linked to over 65,000 companies in 100 plus countries. The moral of the story is check and double check and triple check, because the internet never forgets. Next, a little bit more on the MGM hackers, and there is in our video blog a short piece on what you should be doing in terms of protecting yourself. But it turns out that this con was a very low-tech con. It was a combination of a phishing email where they phish some credentials. So that's really not a big deal. And then a social engineering attack on their outsourced third-party help desk that MGM was running, and Caesars, I think, was running the same help desk. So these hacks don't require a lot of skill. You don't have to break in the system. It's kind of like, asking people to open the door for them. So, the question is, are you prepared? State legislatures keep trying to deal with this online age verification. We have this pesky thing called the First American, which people like when it favors them and don't like when it doesn't favor them. But it does stop the government from restraining speech, and the only kind of speech that you try to restrain is the kind of speech that you don't like. That may not be the kind of speech that the person next to you doesn't like, but if you don't like it, then you want to pass a law. So in this particular case, Arkansas and Texas, and along with a small handful of other states, have enacted laws to supposedly protect the children, but they're very invasive They eliminate the ability to go off and surf the internet anonymously because you must not identify yourself to the website using government issued IDs in order for them to verify. And then, in some cases, other laws, um, well, if the California law, for example, says, well, you need to have a reasonable degree of confidence the person is over 18. Well, how do I know whether someone is 17 or 19? That's ridiculous as a website operator to try to do. Um, so the Arkansas law was blasted by the district court. The Texas law was blasted, and then the appellate court stayed that decision. That's going to go to the Supreme Court's shadow docket. So we'll hear more about that. Ultimately, both of these decisions will ultimately go up to the Supreme Court. No telling what they'll do, but these laws are not going to come in effect. And I think the challenge is that we have this desire of anonymity when we surf the internet, even though we know that the advertisers know who we are. We'd like to think that things are somewhat anonymous, and providing some website operator with your government issued ID, which I am sure will never be hacked ever, is kind of unsettling, and certainly will chill, which is at least for some of these states, that is the objective, right? They don't want you to go off and get this information. So, that's part of the objective. Next, cyber insurance claims are increasing in both severity and frequency. We've heard experts say, "Oh, yeah, this ransomware is going away. This cyber attacks are going away." But Coalition Insurance, who is one of the more aggressive folks and not insuring people they don't like, puts a report out and compares themselves, obviously very favorably, to the rest of the industry, not so favorably, but nonetheless, at least in one category, the numbers are up year over year, 72%. So, cyber attacks are not going away anytime soon. Cyber insurance is still very important. In this week's news bites, lastly, Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban got whacked to the tune of $1 million because guess what? He downloaded some software onto his phone and it was malicious and it stole a crypto wallet and it emptied it. So not good. Google says they're not going to bargain with some YouTube workers because they say they are contract workers. They're not YouTube workers. MGM has restored most of its operations in only 10 days after being hacked. Compare that, for example, that Dallas, which took like, I don't know, 5 weeks, 6 weeks to get some of the stuff, and some of the stuff still not up. So 10 days is pretty good, but they were losing $10 million a day. So they're pretty motivated to get it. And that doesn't include, all the legal fees and stuff, which will wind up being very substantial by the time they're done. Dallas said that their cyber attack, which took them down for weeks and weeks, as I said just a second ago, started with a stolen credentials. And once the people had stolen credentials, la-di-da-di-dee, it was all over at that point. So social engineering is still a big problem, and your employees are the last line of defense for that. And finally, Cisco bought or is going to buy Splunk for $28 billion. That's not going to close till sometime next year. Cisco has a bit of a spotty track record in terms of what they do with acquisitions. People are hoping, including me, that they just leave Splunk alone. There is an advantage for them having Splunk and having Splunk be still very favored by people in that they collect a lot of data in their security appliances. And right now, what they do is they hand that data off and the money that goes along with that to third parties to go analyze it. If they have a tool like Splunk in their toolbox, then they can say, we can do this end to end. We'll collect the data, but we'll analyze the data and generate alerts. So for Cisco, this is definitely a revenue thing. It'll be revenue positive on day one because Splunk is already making money. So unless they screw it up, this should be a winner for Cisco for sure. Whether it winds up being a winner for the users, that's to be determined. And obviously, if you need help with any of this stuff, including trying to protect your help desk or your third-party help desk from being socially engineered, please give us a call. And until next time, stay safe. Thanks for listening.
Turnkey Cybersecurity and Privacy Solutions offers the complete cybersecurity program for small to medium-sized businesses. They include everything needed to secure your business and meet compliance requirements. Visit our website at turnkeycybersecurityandprivacysolutions.com to learn more.